Hello makers, welcome to 3D Maker Noob. I'm Joe and today I have a lot of purge blocks, I have a scale, and I have questions to address. So stick around. Welcome back makers. As you can see in front of me, I have a lot of purge blocks, meaning now I've spent quite some time printing and I do multicolor or multi-material. Now, as most of you know, I have the BCN 3D Sigma R17, which is a dual extruder printer, the Pruge i3 Mark IIs with the multi-material upgrade, and I have the Palette Plus, which basically gives me the ability to turn any printer that takes 1.75mm filament into a multi-material printer. Now, with so many options coming out on the market for multi-material or multicolor printers, a lot of concerns are being raised about the purge block. Now, the purge blocks are considered to be a waste by some and also a necessity by some others. So what I would like to do today is discuss purge blocks, how they work, why they exist, why they have to be there, and why certain things which have been commented on videos simply cannot happen at this stage. So I'll start off by explaining the differences between dual extruder or multi-extruder printers and a single nozzle multicolor printer. Now, when you have a dual extruder or a dual hot end printer that can take two material, all that printer needs to do to change from one color to another is simply just stop extruding from one nozzle, wipe it on a tower, purge a little bit to prime the filament on the other nozzle, and continue printing. So the waste is absolutely minimal. To give you an idea, I have the Sigma, the R17 Sigma, and that is an independent dual extruder. So what it does is it purges a little bit of material, starts printing, moves the nozzle away, brings out the other nozzle, and starts printing with the other one, and keeps on going like that. Every time it is about to start printing, it just purges a little bit into a bucket, resulting in something like this. This was used to print a Moai head in dual color. Now, the Pruge i3 Mark IIs with multi-material upgrade has the ability to grab 4 filaments and push them through one nozzle thanks to a 4-way splitter. So what it does is it starts printing the model. When it needs to change the color, it moves away, starts printing a purge block, retracts one filament out of the way, pushes the other way and the other filament in, prints a certain length which is determined by the user that slices the model, and once it's done purging, it goes back to the model and continues printing. Now, the Palette Plus works in a very different way than any other printer, simply because, well, first of all, it is not a printer and it is in no way connected to the printer. It's not a closed loop system like the multi-material upgrade on the Pruge. You have a machine that simply splices material together and just feeds them through. The printer simply grabs that filament and just prints along the way. The only way that the palette knows what the printer is doing is thanks to a scroll wheel which calculates how much filament the printer is actually taking. As a high-level overview, in order to print something with the Palette Plus, first you slice a model in your favorite slicer. You then transfer it into Chroma, which is the palette slicer, and the Chroma grabs the model, adds a purge block to it, and gives some instructions to the palette, how fast the movement travel is of the printer and everything, and it tells the palette when it should be splicing the filament and so on. So what you do then is you save a copy of the Chroma sliced G-code for the printer, one for the palette, and it starts printing. But it still does the same method of printing sort of as the Pruge multi-material, and that is it starts printing the model. When it comes to the point of transitioning the color, it just moves away, starts printing a purge block, and once the color transition is done, it goes back and continues printing the model. So now that I explained how those things work, I want to address the purge blocks. Now, when I uploaded the video of the multi-material upgrade and also the unboxing of the Palette Plus, I got quite a few questions, and I want to address a few of those questions, which I believe are the most important ones. But first, I want to talk about why some purge blocks are small, some are large, and how you can fix that. So as we said, this is the Purge, which falls into the Purge bucket of the BCN 3D Sigma R17. Now, the Sigma will always have an advantage over single nozzle multi-material printers. And the reason for that is it is a dual extruder. It doesn't need to purge filament to clean the nozzle from the previous color. All it does is it simply primes the nozzle. That's all it does. The purging is there to prime the nozzle, whereas the multi-material upgrade and the palette need to purge the nozzle in order to prime the filament, but also remove any residue of the previous color while it was printing. So in fact, I can tell you now that if your aim in 3D printing is to print solely in either two colors or two materials, nothing else, and you don't want to waste, then a dual extruder printer is the way to go because it will always have the least amount of waste. However, if you want to print in more than two colors or more than two different materials, then you need something. If it doesn't have 4 extruders, which I believe there's only 1 or 2 printers that can do that, then you will need something with a single nozzle and 4 material inputs in it. Now, rather than going through every single piece of purge block that I have here, I want to take one example into consideration so I can explain a few things, and that is this little Marvin right here. This was printed on the Prusa i3 Mark IIs with multi-material upgrade. And this was printed on the Creality CR10 when I attached the Palette Plus to it. They look exactly the same. The print quality is there for both of them. There's no color bleed on each. And they both have a purge block. So I want to do a comparison of those purge blocks and get into more detail about them. Now, these are the purge blocks for the Marvin. This was from the Palette Plus on the CR10, and this was for the multi-material upgrade. Now, while you can see that the Prusa one is 1/4 the size of the Palette, it doesn't mean that it weighs 1/4 of the one on the Palette, and I will get to that in a bit. But first, to give you an idea, the Marvin weighs about 2 grams in filament to print. The purge block from the Palette weighs 30 grams, and the purge block from the Prusa weighs 20 grams. So this weighs 10 times more than the Marvin, while this weighs 15 times more than the Marvin. However, it doesn't just stop there, because both the Prusa and the Palette give you customization option. Now, the Palette gives you the option to change the transition length of filament, and Prusa give you the ability to change the size of the purge block. Now, these are very important because for the Palette, once you calibrate the printer just right, you can actually reduce the amount of transition length. As a standard, it's 13 centimeters, which is this, and this is the standard size on the Prusa. So after calibrating the printer right, I reduced that filament transition length from 13 centimeters down to 10, and I got it down to this size. Now, I could possibly have done it less because of the colors that I have used, but I decided to stop there. Now, to give you an idea of the difference that makes, before the purge block weighed 30 grams, and this weighs 20 grams. And this, as we said, still weighs 20 grams. So as you can see, now they weigh exactly the same. So as you can see, once you've calibrated the printer and you know how it works, you can actually modify the sizes of the purge blocks. However, that's not always possible. And the reason is it all depends on the material you're using or the colors you are using. Because if you're transitioning from red to white, you will need a bigger infill, because what will happen is the white becomes slightly pink, and the explanation or an example for that is this strawberry right here from Tessa. As you can see, the eyes are not white, like pure white, they're slightly pink, and that is because I used the standard size purge block. So in this case, it needed a slightly larger purge block. And that will be the case with most of the prints. It all depends on the colors you are using. As for the weight difference or the size and weight ratio, the reason why this is as heavy as this and this is much larger than this is because when Prusa's multi-material does a transition, it uses 100% infill, whereas when you have a 2-color transition on the Palette Plus, it does about 50% infill. It's bigger, but it's not as dense, and that is why they weigh the same, but the one on the palette is much bigger. Another example is this Pikachu right here. This is the first test print I did with the palette, not the Palette Plus, the palette. And this was the purge block for that. Now this Pikachu weighs about 10 grams and the purge block weighs 102 grams. So you have 10 times the amount of filament used for the print. This was another test. Now I didn't get the color transitions just right, but it was for the same Pikachu but in different colors. As you can see, they're exactly the same height and the same design. And this weighs 68 grams, so you can always reduce it. Now, most of you will tell me that it still weighs because you're using 4, 5, 6, 10 times the filament. Keep in mind that this is for one print. If I had to use the same method to print 20 Pikachus all in one go, the purge block will still be the same exact size because it's only doing the same purge. So it prints the green from here, it goes to the next one and the next one and all the other Pikachus, and still does one transition per layer. So ideally, if you don't want to waste that much, you need to do more prints in order to minimize waste. Now, how do the color transitions work on the purge block? Just because you have a print, for example, this Iron Man right here, this used 3 different colors. And this was the purge block. Now, as you can see, it's massive, but when you see the difference in size, this weighs 74 grams and the purge block weighs 134 grams. So this is not even twice the weight of the Iron Man. And the reason for that is that not all layers have a color change. So when there is no color change, the infill becomes almost 0. It's actually about 4 or 5%. It's just there to hold the structure. As you can see from the side, is just red at the bottom and the color transitions go up. When you have 2 color changes, it turns into about 50%. When you have 3 color changes, it goes to about 75% infill. So it tries to minimize the waste by itself. Obviously, once again, once you calibrate the printer, you can actually reduce that waste even more. Another example is this Wreck-It Ralph right here. This weighs 96 grams, whereas the purge block from the Pruge multi-material upgrade weighs 108 grams. So this weighs almost the same size as this. And another way to minimize the waste is to not have too many color transitions on the same layer. Try to have 2 or maybe 3 maximum, because if you have 4, then obviously you'll have much more purge going on. So to give you an idea, this didn't have more than 3 colors in a layer, and you can see the thickness. It has 2 pillars to go from 1 to 2nd color, and then from the 2nd to the 3rd, then from 3rd to 2nd and 2nd to 1st. When you have 4 colors in one layer, you get the additional purge block here. So it has to go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. So the less color changes you have on a single layer, the better it is. Now, obviously, there will be the cases where the purge blocks are an actual waste, and that is when you have failed prints. And it can be very frustrating because you're expecting a print to finish, you spend about 5, 6, 10 hours waiting for a print to finish that would usually take about an hour in single color, and what happens is it fails. And the example is, well, this parrot right here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I have about 4 more in a box somewhere. What was happening here is the printer was failing all the time. I didn't realize it. I thought it was the Palette Plus, but it was the printer. Now what happens here is you get lots of wasted purge blocks, and this is 502 grams of pretty much wasted filament. That is something you're going to have to live with. And to be completely honest, We all have failed prints, so we all end up with wasted filament at some point. So it's part of the process. Now to get to some of the questions and comments that I had on the videos. Now, one of the questions that I had was, why not use a secondary STL as a purge block and print a model with the purge and then possibly paint it or spray it afterwards? And while that is an absolutely awesome idea, unfortunately, it's not entirely possible. It's not impossible, but it's not entirely possible, because what will happen is you'll still need a purge block for that. And the reason for that is that if you have a model that possibly ends up with a point, like let's say, I don't know, let's say this strawberry right here. Let's say I want to print a second strawberry as a purge block. I still need a certain length of transition. So when it's changing from red to green, right at the top, there is a very small space to do that purge. So it cannot fully purge on that layer. So it still needs a purge block on the side to purge the rest of it. Another comment I had was that purge blocks are waste because they have to grow with the print, which they absolutely do. And the ideal would be to have it as a purge in a bucket. Now, it really won't make any difference to a certain extent, because the same amount of filament still has to be purged to clean the nozzle. So whether you print it or purge it in a bucket, it's still going to transition the same amount of filament. The only time you wouldn't be using any filament there with that method is when you don't have any color transitions. However, when you have a model which has lots of color transitions, like for example, let's say this My Little Pony here, it had color transitions on every single layer. So basically, in this case, you wouldn't have saved any filament whatsoever, because the same amount of filament is going to be purged to clean the nozzle itself. Another concern was that the purge block will limit the build volume. Now, it does and it doesn't, because ultimately, unless you're printing something that takes the full build volume of the printer, then yes, it will reduce that size. However, in most cases, actually most of the prints that I have here are either printed on the Enervision EV160, which has a build volume of 160 by 160 by 160, or the Pruge. Now, unless you want to print many models, then that shouldn't be that much of a factor. With the Pruge, you can actually move the purge block around, so you can leave it in a corner that's not being used. And with the Palette Plus, it actually orients the build plate and the purge block wherever it seems to be the best, which is why some purge blocks have this shape for the Palette Plus and some have square one. Another suggestion I got was, why not use the infill of a model as the purge block? Now, while that is an absolutely great idea, it won't always be possible to do. It most likely will not be possible in most cases. And the reason for that is, even if a print is big, if at the top part or any part of the print, some parts are small or detailed and require 2 or 3 color changes, the print might not have enough space to do that transition or to purge enough filament in order to do a proper clean filament change. Like for example, this right here. If you look at the neck, it's actually, I don't know why it's upside down. If you look at the neck, it's actually a very small area and it has 3 color transitions. So there is no way that there is enough space there. Even if you do the infill at 100%, there's not enough space to do a full color transition. Another comment I had was that it is a waste because all you need to do is simply paint the things differently. And while that is true, because ultimately if you're just looking for multicolor printing, then you'll probably be better off if you just paint things, just put some time to it, finish it and paint it. It will still look absolutely amazing. But if it's multi-material, then that cannot apply here, because soluble support, like this print right here, which needed soluble support, then that obviously cannot happen. And finally, definitely by far the most popular comment was, why not use the purge block as a custom shape of possibly a Lego brick? And that's possibly the most feasible way of doing it. However, there are certain aspects to which have to be taken into consideration. So we need a certain length to do the transition from one color to another. So if the last layer of the print is also dual color, then what will happen is it will finish the print, purge on the purge block, and keep on printing on the purge block to do the notches of the Lego brick, basically. But to be completely honest, that's probably one of the most possible ways of doing this. And I have to admit that if all these were in Lego format, I think that would be actually quite a beautiful build, because as you can see, it's extremely colorful. And while I cannot use these as of yet until I find a way, it would be absolutely awesome to build something out of this. Now, a lot of people have commented and saying, why not CNC them or put them on a lathe? Now, that would be a great idea, but as I said, most of these aren't fully printed on the inside, so it won't actually work. And apart from that, with the friction, there's more of a chance of a drill bit or the lathe just melting the plastic rather than shaping it. So that is it for me, guys. Thank you very much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope I answered some of the questions that you had. If you have any more, please leave them in the comment section below. I will try to reply to you. I have to say that I love multi-material. I love multicolor prints. Yes, it's a lot of filament that I cannot use here, but at the end of the day, all I have to do here is recycle this filament. If I can get something that makes filament, a machine that makes filament, I can just grind this down to a multicolor single roll of filament. So yeah, personally, I find that it's an absolutely awesome way of bringing your prints to life, as you can see, and experimenting. And even with multi-material, if you want to make a hinge with ABS and TPU in the middle, or PLA and TPU, or whatever, I think it's the way forward. So that is it for me, guys, today. Thank you very much for watching once again. I want to thank my patrons for their support. You guys are absolutely awesome. Please comment, share, like, subscribe, and as always, happy making, guys.